Global BC is doing a story tonight about parents in Victoria who are thinking about pulling their kids out of school because they're not comfortable with the COVID numbers and the variants. And no wonder Vancouver Coastal Health sent a letter out to all the parents and staff and students at Carisbrook Elementary. And they said that everybody from kindergarten to grade 7 was potentially exposed to a COVID situation. And they were saying that people should, monitor for symptoms and all the rest of it. So, yeah, you can understand why people are concerned. We know the Toronto schools are going to be closing tomorrow. They're going on spring break, so they're taking a circuit breaker. But there are people here in BC who think we should be doing the same. Like in Surrey, Rani Sangera with the Surrey Parents Advisory Council said Surrey schools are worried and she thinks they should go online for now.
Most parents would agree saying that that's the best that they're thinking for their kids because it's such an unknown right now. The variant is just spreading so quickly. It's out of control.
So should BC look at something like Toronto's doing? Dr. Bonnie Henry was asked if schools in Metro Vancouver in particular should close like they have in Toronto.
The highest risk in our community is in the city of Surrey, where we have taken the most additional measures. We've been working, we have a school team as well that's been working with the Surrey School District, for example, to revamp all of the COVID safety plans in those schools. We also know that cases go up when children are not in school and that the downside impacts on families is immense. So we need to find that way of safely keeping children in school so that we can protect our communities.
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't know. I don't have kids in school. I'm not a teacher, but Terry Mooring is president of the BC Teachers Federation, joining us this afternoon. Thanks for doing this, Terry.
Thanks for having me, Linda.
What do you think about the idea of a circuit breaker for schools in BC, or at least in areas like Surrey?
Well, there's a few things. One is we really need the data. We don't have a clear picture of what's happening in schools because we don't have it. We're hearing that transmission rates are low. Great. We should be seeing this data. And what we're hearing from families is that they just don't have enough information in order to make a clear determination about the safety of their schools that their children go to. And so, with the variant, this is more important than ever. That information is being collected. It's being used to tell us that the transmission rates are low, but not being shared. The other is we have a 5-stage plan in BC, and those stages were developed, in August. But there is no criteria by which we would move from stage to stage. And so, stage 5 is a full online learning. Stage 3 and 4 are hybrid options. Those need to be on the table, in my view, because we are seeing some really alarming numbers, and it's unknown exactly how quickly the variant will spread, but we know it's more transmissible. We know it's been a factor in schools, and so there needs to be clear criteria as to what would move us from one stage to another, even if that approach was regional or district-based, or even school by school. I think there's lots of flexibility that should be built into it. But just saying schools are safe and leaving it at that is just not good enough.
Where is the data, and why aren't you getting access?
Well, that's a good question. We've been asking for a long time, what are the transmission rates? It'd be great to get it provincially. It would be great to get it district by district. We know it's being collected because we are continually told that they're low. And that schools are safe, and lots of different descriptive kind of commentary around schools, but absolutely no data to back it up. We'd also like to see the number of classes that have been asked to isolate. We hear, as you said in the intro, that this not just that school, that where the entire school is being asked to monitor symptoms, in some cases, like quite a number of classes being asked to isolate, but we don't have that provincial picture of what this looks like. We just hear it anecdotally from people that have received the notices. Why is that? We'd like to know the number of children who have contracted COVID, the number of education workers. None of that information has been put together in terms of information and data for the education sector. And, we've been calling on this information to be shared for many months now. And it's just getting to the point where people are just feeling that they don't have enough information in order to answer their questions. And, we would like to see schools stay open as well. That's a goal of ours. But they need to be safe. And in order to ascertain that, we need the information.
I think a lot of people say, well, when Dr. Bonnie Henry says we have to close in restaurant dining because it's not safe to be in an enclosed space with a bunch of other people when you could potentially be exposed to COVID. How then, and I hear this all the time, how then is a school classroom safe when all day long you're in a room with a bunch of people?
Yeah, and that's been the question all along, is why are schools different from other community situations? I mean, the mask mandate was helpful and well received, and people were very relieved, and so that's one thing. The mixed messaging around the mandate, however, is still causing confusion within the field. We're working through that, but they're just with the variant and the fact that we know that we're only testing some folks for the actual variant, and so we also don't have a clear picture of how much of a factor the variant actually is in BC. There's a lot of cause for concern, and so that's why we think, keeping schools open in a hybrid model might be necessary. It still keeps schools open, but it reduces classroom density. We think that's important, especially where we're seeing high levels of community transmission. Obviously, we've been told many times that community transmission relates to in-school exposure notifications and transmission, that our schools are a reflection of our communities, and that's true. And so when we're seeing alarming numbers like this, we need to have a plan in place. And so right now, there is no plan in terms of how do we decide to move from one stage to the next.
When you hear that Toronto is going to close schools tomorrow, then you sort of think about spring break here and this lack of data and lack of information. How do you feel?
Well, it's really concerning because, what we're starting to see now is the results of spring break, and we are not even fully seeing that yet. And then we had the Easter long weekend, and we're not even seeing, that yet. And so it's very concerning. And, obviously, families and education workers are really stressed right now, rightly so. It's a very stressful environment for all of us. And so, the lack of information sharing, the lack of transparency, the inability of ourselves to get answers to questions in a timely manner, this is all leading to additional stress, which should not be happening. I think information is really important when you're in a situation like this, and the fact that we're not getting clear information adds to the stress unnecessarily. Yeah.
Terry Mooring, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Linda.
Terry Mooring is president of the BC Teachers Federation. So yet again, here's another profession that's saying we're not getting enough information. We have a lot of questions, and for months and months and months, we feel like we're not getting the data that could make us feel safe and that make us feel that the restrictions that are in place and the mask mandate and all the rest of it, that we're doing everything we can do.
Even from a mental health standpoint, to have those things worried while you're worrying about these kids, just knowing that you are doing everything okay would be a big relief to a lot of parents and teachers, I'm sure.
I'm Sarah Ritchie. I'm a reporter for Global News in Halifax. I was working the day everything changed in Nova Scotia last April. My team has spent the last year asking tough questions about how a gunman disguised as a police officer murdered 22 people over 13 hours. On our podcast, 13 Hours Inside the Nova Scotia Massacre, we examine this tragedy hour by hour. We're learning there's a lot more to this story. Listen to all 13 episodes now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.